Hold on, I'm just walking. You ready? Good morning. Welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting of the Cape Coral City Council. Today is April 27th, 2022. This meeting now comes to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam City Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gunter,
Here.
Council members Costin,
Here.
Hayden,
Here.
Long,
Here.
Nelson,
Here.
Shepherd,
Here.
Tate,
Here.
Welsh,
Here.
all present.
Thank you. Item 4 is business. 4A is citizens' input time. Citizens' input time is a maximum of 60 minutes is set for the input of citizens on matters concerning city government, 3 minutes per individual. Please remember to state your name for the record. Utilizing the podium to the left. Anyone wishing to participate, citizens' input, please come forward. Seeing none, citizens' input is now closed. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda. 4B is discussions. B1 is internal service charges. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, members of City Council. So this first item for discussion this morning stems from a conversation that I've had with multiple members of City Council. And this topic always seems to come up right around the time we start developing our budget for next year. And there always seems to be confusion over how the city goes about charging its various funds for the internal services that city government provides to the various internal funds. As you know, we operate them as if they were their own separate business units. And so given that we've started the budget development process, and I know all of you are starting to think about what's important in the budget for next year, we thought it's a good time to schedule this for discussion, to kind of walk you through again the whole process that we utilize to allocate those charges across the entire enterprise. So I'm going to have your Financial Services Director, Mark Mason, lead you into this conversation for the next 10 minutes or so. And hopefully we'll be able to remind you, and I get it, if you're not involved in the budget development process all the time, you tend to forget the methodology that we use. So if nothing else, this is just a good refresher course. And maybe what we'll do is, before each budget cycle, we'll make sure we'll cover this again. And hopefully we'll address many of the questions that you have. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I'm turning it over to Mr. Mark Mason. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Mason, Financial Services Director. So the purpose today is we're going to kind of talk a little bit about full cost allocation. We're going to also talk about internal service fund chargebacks. Full cost allocations generally deal with the allocation of indirect cost of services that to operating funds for who use those resources. It's generally internal from general fund out to the various operating funds. Internal service chargebacks are generally if we have an internal service fund, which I'll go to shortly. And these are charging for services similar to a business. So if we were contracting with a business on the outside, be the exact same type of service that we would be providing or purchasing from an external provider. So the full cost allocation, again, is distribute your central service indirect cost or overhead cost to the operating departments. So we do that when I'm talking about operating departments, we can do it internally to within the general fund, although we don't charge internally to the general fund, otherwise you'd just be adding on to itself over and over and over again. But at the same time, it also provides for charging out the services to various operating funds. Operating funds such as the CDBG fund. So we have a person that works in the CDBG fund. There are services that are charged to that. We have utilities, we have stormwater, we have the yacht basin. We also had the water park, and we also had the golf course that would also be charged, as well as the internal service funds. The general fund is the central service center that provides those support services. So when we're talking about support services, we're talking about payroll, we're talking about the accounting function, we're talking about HR, we're also talking about a portion of the city manager's office that provides services and support to the various operating departments, as well as the city council. And, you know, for the city council side, and there has been a question on this in the past, we usually charge off the cost of that overhead or indirect cost just simply based upon the agenda items that come before you. So if, you know, an agenda item comes before you for utilities, then there's going to be a portion of the cost of the city council that would then be charged to the utilities fund. If we're not doing this sort of thing, then, you know, we're not, these other, you know, the indirect costs are not being recovered, then all the revenues or whatever the revenue sources in the general fund would end up needing to cover those costs, and everybody else would not have any of those indirect costs. The full cost allocation was originally developed in accordance with with Budget Circular or OMB Circular A87. That comes out of the federal government. It's been replaced by 2 CFR Part 200 about 5-6 years ago, and so the mechanism for full cost or indirect cost allocations comes from the federal government. So the purpose of the cost allocation plan is, number one, is to recover indirect costs associated with the federal programs. That's number one. So if we have a federal program that's large enough that where we need to do an indirect cost associated with those federal programs, then we would negotiate up a federal program rate, or we would provide them with our indirect cost allocation system and say, this is how we go about, charging back these funds. And so when we're turning around and billing the federal government for the refunds of resources for that which we've spent, then they would approve that as far as the federal programs are concerned. At the same time, we do it to charge internal services for the general fund, which I've talked about, and we would charge those operating funds from the internal service funds, special revenue funds, and enterprise funds. This also supports the determination of full cost of services when considering outsourcing options. So when we're looking at potentially outsourcing something, we would take into account the total cost of what it is that we're outsourcing. And so part of that would be, as an example, if we decided we wanted to outsource payroll, and I'm not suggesting we are, I'm just saying if we decided that's what we wanted to do, we would look at what's our full cost of doing that service internally versus what we would end up paying externally for the same level of service. And then it helps in identify useful management information for recognizing those cost drivers and the benchmarking with other communities. In other words, if I'm benchmarking what our payroll cost is internally, I would be looking at, other communities similar size, how many payroll folks that they have doing the exact same thing, assuming those particular cities do basically the same thing that we do. So helps with benchmarking and understanding whether, if I've got 3 people doing payroll here, is that sufficient number for us to have a good payroll system, compared to others that are doing the exact same thing, of whether they have 5 or whether they have 3 or whether they have 1. Okay? In addition, as a best practice, the Government Finance Officers Association provides a pricing internal services guide as a best practice for us in the industry to price out services for indirect cost or even for the internal service fund charges. In addition, our own financial policies, which City Council adopts, provides for the refunding or the collection of those indirect costs and reimbursements back to the general fund for that same purpose. So as we discussed and what we talked about, the central services that we allocate are those listed here, from the City Council down through information technology services. And these are the items that are not already listed out as internal service funds. So all of these reside in the general fund, and we do a chargeback based upon a number of different methodologies. As I said, with the City Council, we do it based upon agenda items. For payroll, we do it on number of for personnel. And so we have a number of different mechanisms that we charge back on, all of which are allowable, through both 2 CFR Part 200, previously known as A87. Give you an idea of what the cost allocation looks like. This is right out of your budget book in the section, I think it's D, in the budget book for the full cost allocation. This shows you essentially what we adopt as the allocation and the amount of money that we provide for that is reimbursed back to the general fund. In this particular case, in the fiscal year 22 budget, we adopted out $7.9 million that is charged back to those various funds for the services that are being provided from the general fund. This particular chart basically is a summary of those allocated costs. In other words, the cost from the general fund for the various services that are being provided and being charged out to the various operating funds. So moving on from full cost allocation, which is basically the chargeback of internal services from the general fund, we also have something called internal service funds. Internal service funds are basically it's a unit of government, or it's created by governments that provide for a business activity that is shared among all other parts of the organization. In this case, we have internal service funds for fleet. We have an internal service fund for property management. We also have a health fund, which is our self-insurance health fund, as well as the risk fund, which does both general liability as well as workers' comp. And these costs are recovered through internal service fund charges and fees. So, as an example, we have, well, let's see, I think I actually go through the various examples. So we have a number of different recovery methodologies that we can use. One of them is a full cost allocation. So if we wanted to do a full cost allocation, we would simply be charging back whatever portion of that fund, back from the internal service funds, and the services that they're providing to the other funds. So in the general fund case, in various departments, so each department would have a piece of whatever that cost is. Or we use a fully burdened rate at expected hours available per year. So in this particular case, we use property management uses this current method, as well as fleet also uses this method. You can do a combination, the cost of service. In this case, we do a cost of service with a quarterly adjustment. We do this with fleet, and we've done this with property management. So what does that mean? That means that during the course of any one quarter, and I'll take fleet for example, we have a $6 million budget, correction, I'll take property management as an example. We have a $6 million budget. Internal service funds, we need to collect back that $6 million for the operation of the property management internal service fund. So if there's not enough work orders that come through to collect 25% of that in any one quarter, we need to make up for whatever that difference is. And those chargebacks are made chargeback basically back to the various departments or various funds to where the majority of those work orders came from. So that helps to ensure that we recover the full cost of the internal service fund during the course of the year. For the cost of service, we use for health fund and for risk management fund. For the health fund, the cost of service is basically based upon our insurance rates and the claims, or the estimated claims. So if our estimated claims during the course of the year are $25 million, we need to be able to collect back $25 million from every single department, every single division, every single fund within the organization to ensure that there's sufficient resources in the health fund to be able to pay those claims. For risk management, the same thing holds true. For general liability, we pay an insurance premium, and we also have claims that, for example, for vehicles, I believe that we pick up the first $25,000 for vehicles, and then insurance would pick up the rest. And so we have to be able to ensure that the cost of those claims, as well as the cost of insurance, is being paid for. So we utilize for general liability, for vehicle liability, we would take the total number of vehicles that are in each one of the divisions, departments, funds, and charge back whatever the cost of that insurance and the estimated claims would be. And the same thing would apply for other general liability for whatever those claims might be. Risk management also has the workers' comp. We charge back on the workers' comp rate based upon every position in the city. And those funds are also deposited in the risk management fund in order to be able to cover the claims and cover the excess insurance for workers' comp claims. In addition, there's another methodology that we're exploring here. It's called a lease recovery approach. And this particular methodology is used in larger organizations, generally at county levels. I've also seen it used in several cities for the same purpose. To give you an example of what this means is that Fleet, if you took Fleet as a whole, Fleet would take ownership of all the vehicles and lease those vehicles back to each one of the users. Okay, in this particular case, we'll just say, the police department has, I'm not sure exactly how many vehicles, but we'll just say they got 200 vehicles. Okay, so they would pay a lease rate to Fleet annually for the maintenance of the vehicle, the fuel for the vehicles, as well as a replacement rate for the vehicles at some time in the future. This way here, you ensure that, number one, we're covering the full cost of Fleet, we're covering the cost of fuel, we're also covering the cost of future replacement of vehicles to ensure that the funds are available by the time you get there. And so we're looking at this particular methodology from a fleet standpoint, and we're also looking at it from a property management standpoint. So the fiscal year 20, as I kind of gave you an example on property management, so we got $6.1 million in property management and you're going to hear this from me on probably more than one occasion. And not just here. We have a budget of $6.1 million, not including the charter school custodial services, which is a direct charge back to the charter school system. The amount that we need to recover in order to ensure that, if nothing else, that there is a zero net operating gain or loss associated with property management, we need to recover $6.1 million. And so the goal is that if there's technical work orders or the number of work orders that come through the system during the course of the year, you would hope that those work orders over a period of time would come back and recover those costs. So as an example, I might have an electrician being charged out at $110 an hour. All right, so that is very similar to whatever it is that we might be actually go out into the marketplace if we needed to bring an electrician in to do specialized work, we may end up paying basically the same amount on an hourly basis. But we're doing the same. We're doing it internally, so we're charging out this particular fee. If the person's out there for 5 hours, the department or division or whatever it would be charged $650, and they would and that chargeback would come back. The funds would be transferred, say, from the general fund, whatever department it's in, back to the internal service fund, and so the cost of the recovery has been made. And so the charges developed, we developed these charges, utilizing a personal service cost multiplied by a labor rate multiplier, so we can recover the cost of the estimated budget. So to give you an example, again, for property management, we have the hourly rate for an AC refrigeration technician is $41.59. The proposed labor rate and the labor rate we currently have in place is $94. And so that covers the estimated cost of the individual, in this particular case the AC technician, as well as the cost of the operational expenses of the system. So if I've got $6 million and I need to recover this back, and so assuming that all of the number of work orders that are being charged out during the course of the year recovers back this total cost, these numbers right here would recover the entire $6.1 million.
And if I can just chime in for 1 second, Mayor and council members, sometimes you will hear me say a fully burdened rate, and I think you'll be hearing that term more so in the future. That's what I mean when I say a fully burdened rate. It takes into account all of the direct costs for that individual, plus all of the overhead that goes along with that individual. And that's why, for example, like somebody asked me the other day, I'll use a crazy example, why it may cost, I don't know, $45 to repaint your office, as opposed to you going out into the local market and hiring a painter directly. but we have to charge the fully burdened rate. Did I make that a little clearer, or actually did I make it worse? Okay.
So yes, it's exactly what it is, the fully burdened rate, and this is what we charge back, and this is how we look to try to recover the overall cost of the service that's being provided from the property management fund. And so, in conclusion, we have a number, we clearly have the need to be able to charge back the cost of services from both the general fund to the various operating funds, as well as the need to charge back for services that the internal service funds provide. And so both the full cost allocation and internal service funds are internal service charges are designed to recover those costs of services. We do full cost allocations to recover the cost of internal services from general funds as well as operating funds and including those internal service funds. And we talked about why internal service funds are created in order to have a business unit essentially providing services within the organization to where you don't necessarily have to go out and hire multiple different contractors to come in here and do the same type of work. There are several different methodologies that we use for pricing internal services, and those internal service pricing methodologies should be and are reviewed annually. And so so I'm here for any questions, yeah.
Councilmember Hayden.
So Mark, this can be tough to understand and a little complicated, so I'm going to boil it down to a few things that I've seen over the last 17 months.
Okay.
National Golf Foundation report said our full cost allocations compared to other courses or other cities around the country seemed high, which can be debated and looked at. But if I look at the golf course, for instance, there was one year where they were charged, I think, $4,000 or $5,000 for council agenda items. So, how does that? What's the methodology used for that? Is it broken down in the amount of staff time it takes to prepare something for council? For instance, the money we allocated for new cart pass. That presentation, how is it determined that it's going to cost the golf course? Or is it one set rate per agenda item, or how does that work for the full cost allocation?
Actually, doing the set rate thing is probably a good way to explain it as any. We'll just assume that when we build the full cost allocation, we're utilizing a prior year service and trying to estimate what will happen in the future year. And so for the city council, we'll just say your budget is $860,000. So ultimately, the goal is to recover the cost of $860,000. The majority of the agenda items that come through the city council are actually internal to the general fund. And so we'll just say you had 1,000 items that came through. You take 1,000 items against 860, and whatever that dollar cost is associated with that, and then you multiply it by the number of agenda items that the golf course had. In this particular case, whatever that number was, it came up to $5,000.
And can you also explain, the public might look at it, all right, the golf course pays a full cost allocation, but then we may subsidize them. So it looks like two checks passing in the night. What the difference might be between the two if they're paying us, but then we're paying them as well.
Part of paying them is in some cases their fees and charges are not sufficient to recover their cost. Okay, and so we'll just assuming that the golf course is $3 million and includes $500,000 cost of the provision of services from the general fund. I'm not sure exactly what the number is, but we'll just say it's $500,000. Then overall, their fees and charges need to recover $3 million. And if their fees and charges are only recovering $2.2 million, then something else needs to make up for that, okay? And in this particular case, it would be us. And so the net associated with that would be the $300,000 net between the two, with the fact that they still need to reimburse us back for the full cost or the indirect cost, but at the same time, we're we're transferring $800,000 for them to recover their cost. And so, on a net basis, we actually funded them $300,000 for their current operations.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mayor.
I know that sounds a little crazy, but it does happen.
Councilmember Tate.
Thank you. Mark, you mentioned the lease recovery, and we may be going to that. Are we going to see that in this year's budget? Or are you just thinking about it?
No. As a matter of fact, we're going out and doing some work on the fleet as far as an RFP is concerned, and one of those will be evaluating this particular methodology. I do know, in some states use it more than others. In Florida, I only know about 3 or 4 different places that use it. Counties generally use it, the larger the county, because frankly, to have individual ownership of vehicles at department levels on counties that have 8, 10, 15,000 employees is a little bit much. And so you try to concentrate the ownership of all the vehicles in one location, and then you just lease them out at a cost for both maintenance, fuel, as well as replacement.
Okay, thank you.
If I can also chime in, when you go to that type of methodology, because we had that in the organization that I work with, you would hear complaints from operating units or staff who'd come back and say to the elected officials, well, do you know that car costs us $600 a month? I can go out to Enterprise and rent a car for $200 a month. Well, again, it's because it factors in all of that extra overhead plus the capital recovery charge that you don't pay when you go to the local market and just rent a car off the local market. So all of those costs are factored in, and that's why you get, I don't want to equate it to the $19,000 hammer that people always talk about, that the federal government pays for a hammer, but it's similar in concept.
We're leaning that way.
We are. I think as an organization, the size of the city and the potential growth of the city going forward, I think it's probably a high time we actually started looking at that particular methodology and going down that road. Yes.
If you take a look at what we're doing now compared to going to this different methodology, what would be the biggest advantage for us? In your opinion?
Efficiencies. In this particular case, when people are requesting vehicles, they're going through, from a purchase standpoint, or they're requesting replacement of vehicles. We have a methodology in place for the replacement of vehicles, and when its ownership is located here, we're not just going to replace the vehicles because somebody wants them. It's more of a matter we stick to the methodology that we have for replacements. And, it's control and efficiencies. Well, I would expect that there will be a huge number of efficiencies. Even in my own shop, it becomes a journal entry to simply transfer the money monthly, whereas right now I've got people doing, journal entries every single day to record the work orders. Okay?
The one drawback to that methodology is underestimating the future replacement costs of that vehicle and not recovering enough. So it's going to be incumbent on us to make sure that we identify what the future replacement costs are throughout the life cycle of that vehicle to ensure that when that vehicle needs to be replaced at the end of, let's say, 5 years, that there's enough budgeted in that replacement account for that vehicle's replacement. Otherwise, you start having to scramble to find other funding to supplement the shortfall.
So it puts more of a burden on us to make sure that we got our numbers where they need to be.
We have to get our numbers right, and we can't control what the market does, right? So, you may factor in, let's say if we're replacing a fire engine, we think that 5 years from now, that replacement fire engine is gonna cost, let's say, $1 million based on the 3% cost escalator. But if the market goes crazy like we've been witnessing the last year and a half, that pumper may end up costing us $1.5 million, but yet we've only planned for $1 million. So we would have to come up with that $500,000 when it's time to replace that vehicle.
We would be looking at that, and generally speaking, the places that I've worked, we would be looking at that annually. Mm-hmm. Or if nothing else, at least biannually to see what the overall changes have been. In this particular case, fire trucks, they generally have a very good standard increase every single year. And, you know, you can count on those increases every single year. And then, you know, we're going through a very crazy time right now where some of those increases have, you know, skyrocketed, basically.
Yeah, in today's market, I would probably suggest we do that on an annual basis because, you know, if you look just in the last year, you know, the market's so volatile right now that that's something that we should probably look at an annual basis instead of a biannual. If the market's a little more flat or consistent, then maybe biannual.
Right. And so, again, you know, we would have the resources necessary you know, generally speaking, we would have the resources necessary when we come before you and we're talking about replacement of vehicles. The resources are there. And, you know, we're not scrambling to figure out where we can get the money in the general fund, where we can get the money in, you know, in the water and sewer, where we can get the money anywhere in order to replace these vehicles. We've created a system whereby we're going to have the methodology and the resources necessary to replace them as they come due.
Have you used this methodology at any other municipalities or counties that you've worked for in the past? You have?
Yep.
So,
Okay.
Yeah. This is, we believe it'll probably, at this point, you know, and when we get the consultants in here, we'll be evaluating this, make sure we have the resources necessary to be able to manage it. That's the most important part.
Any other questions? Councilmember Shepherd.
The only thing I'm a little uncomfortable with is, if I heard you right, is that when council has a particular item on the agenda, say the golf course, that account's going to be billed for our time?
No,
Did I hear that correctly?
it's done through a full cost allocation. We estimate up front in the beginning of the year what those numbers are. So when you're talking about billed for your time, not for your time for the agenda item itself, your total cost has a cost. The total cost of the council is, again, $800,000. And so we assume that you've got, you know, 1,000 agenda items during the course of the year. So each agenda item has a dollar value associated with it.
So our actions can't escalate that?
Your actions cannot escalate it, no.
Okay, that's all I need to know. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Tate.
Mark, when you said you get efficiencies and controls, you don't necessarily save money then with leasing recovery. Efficiencies don't equate to savings, right? It's just better managed?
Actually, better managed actually can create efficiencies and savings, but,
But
you
have
know,
you
that's
seen
what we would
that
expect.
in the places that you all have worked?
Yes.
Or is it mostly, you know, just efficiencies and control?
Efficiencies.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, the cost of vehicles are the cost of vehicles. They are what they are. But we can get efficiencies with the cost of service.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Okay.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Mason.
Thank you.
and Mark's not gonna go too far, Mr. Mayor, because he's got the next item on the.
Okay, well, that's good. We'll move on to item B2, quarterly grant application and management report.
Okay, so grants, this is the second time we've done this. We're in the second quarter. During the second quarter, we applied for 18 grants, the bulk of which were applied through the police department. We have no pending awards as of today, and the number of awards that we did get during the course of the second quarter were 3. So I just want to remind everybody, when it comes to grants, and I'm going to show you an example here shortly. Sometimes the grant awards don't come for a year from the time that we actually maybe apply for them, or 9 months, or 8 months, or whatever it is. So we can talk about the ones that we've applied for, but we may not talk about them again until we actually get the award and they're before you and you're saying, hey, I remember that we applied for that. So during the list of grants that we've applied for during the second quarter, you're going to, for the most part, there's a couple on here that actually were from a prior year, but I'm actually showing the amount that were awarded. As an example, we applied for a grant in the first quarter for drug recognition expert call-out, and we were awarded that, and so the start date is in the first quarter of this year. Again, I asked you before, you want me to go through all these? Yeah, I won't go through those, okay. I think on this particular page, we have utilities, alternative water supply, cooperative grant funding. So we applied for this back in February of 2021. We were recently notified last week that we were awarded $2.7 million. And so I realize that that's actually in the third quarter. It's mostly April because it happened in April. But I wanted you to basically see this from a time frame of when we actually apply for things and when we're notified. It's a full year later when we get through South Florida Water Management District. However, the interesting part about this particular grant is that the South Florida Water Management District was provided, I think, they provided $3.7 million in total grants, of which we received $2.8 million of that 3.7. So that's a big number for us. You know, unfortunately, the other one that we applied for, so they couldn't give us all the money apparently. The $375,000 that we applied for the alternative water supply cooperative grant funding, they didn't give it to us. They gave that to somebody else. But we'll take the 2.8. You know, that's always a good thing. Just as a reminder, TDC, I think we submitted, I think, 3 grants to the TDC. No, 4 grants to the TDC, and I'm not sure where that is in the process, but I think they had a meeting last week, and so.
Three of the 4 were funded.
Yeah, so not sure which ones those are today, but those will be on this this schedule for next time around. And I'm sorry?
J.C. Park was the one that was not funded this year.
Okay, 250,000, okay. All right, so we have 63 total active grants today, totaling $72 million, of which we still have $52.9 million left to draw. The largest share of this is the $25 million from the ARPA funds. I believe that we're very soon going to be out for bidding for the line to the CRA, and so we'll start construction with that, and we'll start spending down the ARPA money. We should be, if we haven't received it yet, and I don't think we have, but we should be receiving the second tranche very, very soon. I believe we received it last year in April, at the end of April, so we should be receiving it as well.
Yes,
very soon.
In fact, I think last week we just got notified by the feds to expect our next payment any day now.
So,
In the dollar amount of that payment?
12.9 million, thereabouts. Yeah. It's just as simply the other half of what we received last year of the $25 million. And so I have a list of active grants here by the various departments who control those grants. The majority of the grants for CDBG, some of these grants go back 3 or 4 years. CDBG grants are active for 5 years unless we if we sell a property that we funded, those funds come back in and they go back through the cycle and they're awarded back out into the same grant. We have a number of fire grants that are outstanding. Many of these are all active. They're all active, yep. 11 grants with police. We have 5 with Parks and Recreation, soon to be more. And then we also have several with 19 with Public Works. Most of these are sidewalk grants. And last but not least, we have utility grants, 15 of those of $40 million. Again, $25 million of that is the ARPA funding. And do I have any questions?
I got one question.
Sure.
From Mr. City Manager. You know, I know the police and the fire departments, they have grant coordinators. Can you maybe explain a little bit how the other departments, how do they handle the coordinating or applying for the grants? Is that pretty much per department and it's kind of relied on by maybe the department director or their staff, or is that coordinated through your office?
So, Mr. Mayor, the honest answer is it's all of the above. And so it's actually right now a comprehensive approach that involves departments identifying funding opportunities that they may become knowledgeable of. We also have a gentleman in our office, Matt Grambaugh, who's in attendance today. Matt is playing more of a enterprise-wide lead in terms of identifying funding opportunities that come our way, and then he coordinates with the various departments. And also then Mr. Mason also has staff resources in financial services that also assists with identifying funding opportunities. And so we use all of that at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Tate?
So this question is kind of for Matt. And, when Councilmember Hayden and I were in Tallahassee, we met with Dane Eagle, and there was some discussion about the training and implementation to help us improve our process for doing grants. And I just wanted council to be aware of where we are in that process, because I noticed yesterday, and I think I talked to Matt about it in the news press, I believe, there was a whole list of grants that were given out by the governor and CDBG and other areas, which of course we weren't in part of. So I know that I talked to Matt, and just to give us an update on how that's going, and did you get the training that we had talked about? And I appreciate it, Matt, just to give us an update.
Hi, Matthew Grambo, Special Projects Coordinator in the City Manager's Office. So the grant that Dane Eagle and the DEO are working on is the Florida Job Growth Grant, and city staff have been identifying projects and also working with both the state and other units of local government to determine projects that would be eligible under that program. And I've been working with Ms. Maureen Bice in our department to make sure that we have a project that's eligible. It needs to be, for that particular program, there's very specific requirements on the grant project being in an area, a distressed area. And so we are working on identifying a list of upcoming city projects that would be eligible for that grant funding. It's an annual program, so our hope is to apply for the 2021 to 2022 cycle, as well as next year's cycle, once we get confirmation that the projects that we'd be submitting are eligible under the program. So we have been working on applications for that funding. It's a rolling grant opportunity, so there's no deadline. So the idea is just to take advantage of every single opportunity that we have for this pool of funding, as long as we have a project that is eligible under that distressed area criteria.
Thank you. And you hear all the time, all these cities and towns that are begging for money for water and sewer projects that they're going to finally get started on. And yet, here we've been the most aggressive and taking care of our own situation. No one's handing us any money for actually having completed it. So is there an opportunity coming up for us to be able to maybe get Northeast, any of Northeast or Northwest? I mean, it just really bothers me when I see other cities saying we need to get money to get water and sewer, because they're afraid to do what we've taken a bold step to do and take care of the environment.
So that's a very good point, council member. We have been extremely proactive in moving forward an agenda to ensure that we exceed water quality standards, that we continue to expand our infrastructure. And sometimes, because we have been so diligent and proactive at that, it actually works against us. I was having a discussion with Mr. Pearson about this the other day, and it seems like some communities ignore their capital needs, and they just wait to a point where either the federal government or the state government hits them with a consent order, and then that, believe it or not, moves them along, actually moves them into a higher tier for a higher priority to receive grant funding. And yet, because we're doing what we need to be doing, we're actually penalized for that, if that makes sense, right? And so, and we have some other issues in that we don't have the socioeconomic conditions and economically distressed areas that other communities across the state and across the country have. And so that also puts us at a disadvantage sometimes when we're seeking grant funding from state and federal funding sources.
So being successful isn't always correct.
But I would not recommend that we change our course. We continue to do what we're doing.
I'm proud of
regardless.
the fact that we've taken the lead. It just, like you say, you know, when you see all these cities going, oh, poor is me, and then the government hands them a check, it's just very disheartening.
Yes, I agree.
But I don't want you to think we're not still considering SRF, and we are. We've met with SRF, and you know they've actually ratcheted down the amount that's available as opposed to ratcheting up. So we're going to be meeting this week and making some determinations about which ones we're going to apply for.
Councilmember Shepherd.
Yes, with the grant we received, would we be paying back the money that we used for the bubble curtains? What fund did the bubble curtains come out of?
Stormwater.
Stormwater? So would we pay stormwater back with the grant we received, or no?
This grant that we received from South Florida Water Management District wasn't for bubble curtains. This was actually for one of the 5 MGD tanks that we're in the process of building over off of Chiquita.
Oh, okay.
So that's strictly for that.
Gotcha.
And, you know, but in this particular case, stormwater
For a
paid for
certain
the bubble
item,
curtains. So
not
we're
abroad.
not going to get any funding back for the bubble curtains.
Okay.
Any other questions from Mr. Mason? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
All right, I'll see you back up here in a minute.
Okay, the next item on the agenda, 4B3, is water scheduling discussion.
Yeah.
Mr. City Manager.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, so I'm going to have Mr. Pearson come up to the podium. So this particular item is something that we've been working on for some time. And I know that given the Stage 1 declaration that we just announced on Monday, it may cause a little bit of confusion, but let's take aside for a second the Stage 1 advisory and assume that that didn't happen. So we've been working on this particular change to our irrigation, our irrigation schedule to basically allow for more consistency and more opportunities for individuals to water their lawn and landscaping. And so by that, what Jeff is going to walk you through is a proposal to extend the dates and times that are available for people to water so that we don't have so many customers on the system at the same time. And we believe that that has led to many of the complaints that you may have received in your office about low water pressure. And there is a belief out there that, you know, Mr. Pearson comes in at 2 o'clock in the morning and he's scheming to figure out ways to lower people's water pressure. I can assure you that Mr. Pearson, while he may be in the office at 2 o'clock in the morning, he's not scheming on lowering people's water pressures. It just is that we have too many users on the system. And so he and his staff have come up with a way to hopefully address that issue. And so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Pearson now to walk you through that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Good morning, Mayor and Council. Jeff Pearson, Utilities Director. I have a presentation here I'd like to share. There it is. First of all, I'd just like to remind everyone the City of Cape Coral has over 800 fire hydrants on the reclaimed water system. So maintaining a more static pressure and flow is very important. And what we're proposing will help us to get there, to actually improve that pressure and flow throughout the day, including at night between the hours of midnight and right now midnight and 8 a.m., which is our current watering schedule. What we're proposing is to expand that watering schedule. Right now, we do not allow watering on Tuesdays, so we have 6 days a week that we can water. Each home or property can water twice a week. So that gives us a total of 12 watering slots, 4 hours each. And so that's, they're spread out to where we have a few days in between waterings, preferably 2 days at least between waterings, so people are not watering their 2 days back-to-back days, because as we all know, water has to percolate down, and watering back-to-back is not helpful depending on the time of year and the season that we're in. So what we've proposed is removing Tuesday as a non-watering day and adding the hours of 8 p.m. through midnight. So basically, it would give us an additional Actually, it will bring it up to 21 possible slots, but we only need 8 to cover each day of the week. What I did was I had our GIS, one of our GIS experts, go into our graphical information system and pull down and tell me how many homes do we have on the irrigation system, potential, and it's not a perfect science, GIS, it just gives you a good idea of how many homes we have out there with the last number 0, 1, 2, all the way through 9. So that gave me a good idea of how many potentially could be watering on a given day. And so what we did was we looked at that and thought, well, you know, if we spread out the time period, basically what we're doing is we're creating demand management. It's a concept that allows utilities to spread out that demand over more time to where we're not getting hammered by double the number at the same time. So by increasing to 20 watering time slots, we can better manage that demand, and it will result in better irrigation system pressures and flow. Our current average number of customers that can irrigate per day is approximately 13,367 based on the GIS numbers that I was provided. What we can do by adding those additional time slots is reduce it down to a little over 8,000, which comes out to approximately a 40% reduction on any given watering time slot. That is really going to be a game changer. I also believe that it will cut down on illegal watering, because a lot of times I think people will illegally water because of the pressure that they may be experiencing during their particular time slot. And also, one of the things, though, that we're going to have to do is the lowest number of people watering at any given time actually ends with a 9, the number 9. So in order to make this system work, I have to, I was able to 0 through 8, they have the same watering time, but 2 different days with 2 days in between. It's mathematically impossible for me to provide the one number, which I picked the number 9 because it had the lowest number of customers, that cannot water at the same time on 2 days, 2 days apart. It's mathematically impossible. So what I decided to do is have those 2 days. I was able to configure the watering schedule where they would have 2 days in between, but their 2 watering times would be a little bit different. I was advised by some of the irrigation professionals here in the community that some people may have an old antiquated controller. Most of these controllers were probably made back in the 70s and 80s, and some folks may not have upgraded to the new style of controllers, which basically allows you to water on any given day at any given time. And so in another ordinance that will be coming to you at the next COW meeting, we'll discuss more into some of the other changes that we're going to be presenting related to the irrigation watering ordinance. And one of those things that staff is considering, would like council to consider, is possibly providing up to a $500 rebate for only those properties that will put in a new, say it's a new home, they put in a new efficient system that meets the new ordinance guidelines may be eligible for up to a $500 rebate, or they upgrade an existing system to meet the new guidelines. So, but that actually is going to have to be a completely separate ordinance outside of the two ordinances that I'm bringing forward. And the reason why is we're updating our impact fees. And because now that we have the master plan in hand, we can actually take those costs and look at and project forward what the impact fees should be for cost recovery. And so I would like to bring that when I bring back the impact fees. But that's a whole nother matter. This is basically a breakdown of the revised watering schedule. Basically, I created a couple of Excel spreadsheets. The average customer, if you look at every customer in the whole city, they use, if they were watering every day, 7 days a week, they would be using about 770 gallons for every single irrigation customer we have. So if they watered twice a week, that comes out to 2,695 gallons. So each time the 4 hours that they would water. So if you look at the current ordinance, you can see the number of customers, especially on Wednesday, 12 to 4, 4 to 8, Thursday, 12 to 4. I mean, we're in the 14 to 16,000 range of the number of properties that could irrigate at any given time. So if you look at the schedule on the right, we're basically reducing that down to by an average of 40%. And so it's really going to be a game changer, I feel like. And so I think also, and probably the single most important thing, which is our fire hydrants will have more static pressure and flow, especially during those critical times during the evening when a lot of fires can happen when people are asleep. So I think it's very important that we consider this. And I'm available for any questions that you may have at this time.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I can, before you start asking questions on this, is it okay for Jeff to give you an update on what we've been doing recently, given that we're now in a stage 1 advisory, or do you want to wait until later for that?
Yeah, I think let's finish this discussion on this particular
Okay,
item, and then we can move on. If you want to have another discussion, that's fine.
okay.
All right, I'll now open up any questions that council may have from Mr. Pearson. The only thing that I saw when I read the ordinance, the $500, I had questioned Mr. City Manager yesterday in my meeting. That sounds like that's something to come.
Yes, sir.
So we kind of put that in here. When I was reading the ordinance that's proposed for this watering schedule, first, to begin with, I think it's a great idea because what we've done is we've spread the demand, and I think I know I've gotten several emails here even recently regarding water pressure. So what we've done is we've actually spread the demand over a longer period of time. The residents still have the 2 days a week. So to me, I think it's a great idea. So I will definitely support it. The only concern that I have in the proposed ordinance that you've listed in our backup material is if you've taken the new lawns and landscaping from 45 days to 30 days. And I contacted a few landscapers. They tell me grass typically takes about 4 to 6 weeks to really take root and be able to survive. And during that time, if we reduce it to 30, that could compromise those new lawns. So could you explain why you went from 45 to 30?
Sure, Mayor, I'd happy to do so. Actually, we expanded it. the old ordinance, the current ordinance does specify 45 days. However, during our stakeholders meetings that we've been conducting over the past probably 10 months or so, some of the irrigation professionals feel the same way that I think some of the folks you spoke with, that the 45 days wasn't enough. So we came to a compromise that the first 30 days they would be able to water 6 days a week for 6 hours each day for new plantings and new landscaping, and then days 31 through 90, because really it depends on the time of year, and I imagine Councilmember Shepherd can attest to this, right now during the dry season, some plants may need more water. So, there's not that silver bullet perfect schedule year round that would hold. So what we decided was at day 31 through 90, we would tailor it down to 4 days a week for 6 hours, which is still more than double what they're allowed now. So actually we expanded it rather than shortened it. I probably could have did a better job and put that in the PowerPoint.
Yeah,
I
because now
apologize.
it's 45 days for basically 4 hours, 6 days a week, if I recall correctly.
Correct. So actually they're going to get more time.
Okay, all right.
Yes,
That was
sir.
the only question I had. Councilmember Hayden?
Yeah, Jeff, I know you listed in the PowerPoint, but you might also talk a little bit about that we're actually changing the times as well, from moving them up to 8 p.m. instead of starting watering times at midnight, and why we're doing that.
Well, that's a great question, Councilmember. One of the reasons, of course, it will, that 8 p.m. to midnight, that additional time period, the sun, really the solar noon is actually not noon. It's not 12. It's usually around 12:30 because of the longitude and latitude that we're located on the planet. So the district does not allow, there's actually a little known section in the district that I had to actually go back and look at it. They do not recommend that anyone water between the hours of 10 a.m. to, I believe it's either 4 or 6 p.m. So, because that's the highest time of evaporation and what they call evapotranspiration, where the plants are taking up water, trees. So we wanted to completely stay out of that time, because the efficiency goes way down. It can go down by 50% or more, by watering. We would be losing that water to the atmosphere and to the plants. So we wanted to stay away from that. We felt like the 8 p.m. to midnight was a good compromise to add to the schedule, because it would not get into that time frame that the district does not want you to water. And also it gave us an additional 8 additional time slots that we needed to make this work.
And the reason that pressure is so important is sprinkler systems, at least a lot of the new ones, won't work effectively if the pressures are too low. So by going to this new watering schedule, it puts us in a better position to keep consistent water pressure so that all systems work. Just to let this council know, you were supposed to see today as well the irrigation efficiency ordinance as a part of this. I asked the mayor a week ago to pull that from this particular discussion. This particular ordinance has been ongoing for the past 16 months, and we've been working with the Building Industry Association and irrigation experts, incredibly closely, word by word in this ordinance. And the building industry wanted to review it one more time so that we could answer any specific questions that they might have, or we're really close to getting their complete buy-in on this. But it was important to me for this ordinance to be as close to perfect as we could get it because of what it means for our environment and what it means for water conservation. Jeff talked about game-changing situations. This watering schedule is one of them. This irrigation ordinance will be another one. I hope and I believe so. We want to make sure it's right, so you'll hear that discussion. We'll have that discussion in a couple weeks. There was really, initially the watering schedule was a part of that ordinance, but it didn't really need to be because it was separate in the first place, and because of some length of time that's going to be needed to educate people on the irrigation ordinance should it pass. You know, that could take some time, but there was no real reason to wait on the watering schedule and the importance of it. So that's all.
Thank you. Councilmember Tate?
Mr. Pearson, can you go back to your slide and explain to me, maybe I just missed it, small number of customers addressing a 9 with older time controllers. Do we know that just addressing ending in 9 has old timer controllers? I mean, where did the geographic system get that area, or if you can tell me that?
The reason why that I selected 9 is because it had the lowest number of potential customers.
I mean, what geographic area is it? I'm trying to think
It's
like
all
Yacht
over.
Club, because we have the oldest homes there, so I would assume that most of the older equipment is there. So that's why I was just wondering, because I end in 1 and I have one of those older ones.
Yeah, we thought that basically your 9s would be spread out over the entire city.
Okay, so it's not a geographic area.
No, it would be the entire city.
Okay. And then my other concern, which the press release that went out, is the schedule that you're talking about, correct? That hasn't changed since the press release went out?
Correct, that's the
Okay.
current schedule.
So I brought that to the city manager's attention in my meeting with him. It's just, we have so many property managers, and we don't have a lot of the property managers are not members of the MLS. So I don't know if they hold business licenses, just like the lawn people have business licenses. And can we make sure that we email that? I know we did a press release, but is there another way to communicate besides press releases? Because we know people don't read the news. I mean, we've got that, sorry, Tom, but people don't read it. So I don't know how else, but if we have email addresses, can we send this notification out, or in the water bill, can we send a notification out? Some other way that we can get to these businesses. And then for all the seasonal residents who we had just heard from a couple of weeks ago, there's a lot of them that have already gone. So I'm assuming we're going to do a warning, and if we can't reach them and they're away for 4 months, you know, it's going to be difficult to get all this under control with such a short time frame. I know I sent it to the Realtor Association myself, and I know Melissa's team did send it out, but getting that word out within a weekend is going to be extremely difficult. And like I said, so many property managers are foreign managers that are not here or not part of our organization. So if we do have emails and we have other ways of communication, if we could do that, I don't know if the city manager can say yes or no or how that works, but.
The answer is yes. We have access to a variety of databases where we track people's contact information, whether it's the rental registration ordinance, business tax receipts, things of that nature. And so we'll take advantage of that information that we have to help spread the word with regard to, I think what you're referring to is the stage 1
Yeah, this
advisory.
one that we're going to do.
And then we'll also do it for this as well.
Because it starts next Monday, yeah. So in that short period of time, it's going to be extremely difficult to reach everybody. Okay, thank you. And thank you for explaining that ending in 9 thing. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Welsh?
Thank you, Mayor. Looking at the revised watering schedule, I think it's a great idea, especially with the growth that we're seeing in the city. You know, looking at the schedule now, we're at up to 16,000 users at certain times, and I know it's a 40% reduction now, but in 10 years from now, it might only be 30 or 20%. And I know by then we'll have all of our pipeline in the way and there'll be new and greater technology, but this is certainly a step in the right path moving forward, and I support this 100%. Thank you.
Could you go back to the $500
Sure.
rebate? Now, my understanding, that $500 rebate will be based upon going to this expanded schedule for anybody that has a 9 at the end of their address, correct?
No, sir. It will be related to the other ordinance that hasn't been brought forward yet, where if you put in one of these smart systems with soil sensors and you meet the statute guidelines, which allows variances for the 2-day-a-week watering schedule, that you might be eligible for a $500 rebate if that system is put in that's going to get you a 30, possibly up to a 50% efficiency, which is conserving water. That's the other side of this. This one's not going to conserve any water. They're still going to be using the same amount of water. The other ordinance that's going to be brought forward, that's the one that's going to save us money and water. Because if we're saving water, we're saving money. So the cheapest form of new water supply is through conservation.
Okay. Councilmember Tate.
Where does the money come from to do the rebates?
It would come from our capital facilities expansion charges that we charge now. It's mainly going to be new homes that would be eligible that put in the new systems that we're going to be regulating.
So will it be a credit on their impact fees? Or I know we call them capital contribution fees now, but so if their contribution fee is $4,000 for sewer or for irrigation, and then they put in this system, then they get a credit on that? Or are we actually going to send people a check?
No, they would just get a credit. We want to keep from having to send out checks. They would just pay less,
And then,
is what we envisioned.
do they provide that information through the building department that says, this is my new sprinkler system in their permit? And you'll see that they have that new kind, and then they get that discount on their impact fee?
Correct. That's how we envisioned it to
That's
work.
how you envision. Is that what the ordinance actually says?
No.
Okay.
That will be done with the new impact fee ordinance that we're still working on
Oh, so that's going to be a while
at a
yet.
later date.
Okay, that's going to
Correct.
be a while yet. Okay.
Yes.
All right, thanks.
Councilmember Long.
Thanks. Yeah, Jeff, real quick, I know this seems like it's a discussion for another day, the $500 deal, but you lost me there. You said that we had identified the issue that we're going to be providing this $500 rebate for older homes or older units, and then you turned around and said that it's going to be new construction, which I would imagine would already be putting those in.
I'm just saying that sorry, I wasn't clear. What I meant was the majority will probably be your newer homes, because they will have to put those in. In the other ordinance, it's not mandated that if you have an existing system, you do not have to meet the new rules.
Okay.
But that's a conversation we'll have at a later
We're not
date.
providing the rebates to the new homes that are going to have to put those in anyways.
They would have to put in a new system similar to the ones that the new homes would have to put in. So they would have to completely put in a completely new system.
I understand that part. I misunderstood the way that you presented it, I guess. Thank you.
Sorry, I wasn't clear.
That's okay. That's my end.
Any other questions for Mr. Pearson? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So if I can, Mr. Mayor, just have Jeff remain at the podium and just kind of give a quick outline on activities that we've undertaken in response to this dry spell that we are in, which led us to issuing the Stage 1 water shortage condition declaration.
What we're doing right now, we approach the Florida Department of Transportation to begin pumping. As soon as we met the trigger points in our water use permit, we've got a 20-year water use permit with the Southwest Florida Water Management District, which is actually not the district Lee County is in. It's actually the district that serves north of us, beginning with Charlotte County and goes up north, up through mainly the southwest coast, all the way up through Tampa and a little beyond. They provide, in 2020, we received a permit from them, but it has certain trigger points. And so those trigger points are that we have to be at a certain level in the canal. Our pressures have to be below 35 pounds per square inch, and there is another trigger point. But if we meet any one of those trigger points, we can start pumping, whether we have a dedicated pipeline and pump station in place, which we're currently designing right now through a grant from the state. Then we can start pumping, or pump it into the US 41 swells that FDOT maintains. I approached the FDOT shortly after we were getting close, or before we got close to reaching those trigger points, and I said, it's looking like we're not going to get any rain. I was, of course, praying for rain every day, and seeing that we weren't going to get any precipitation, I approached them. They agreed to allow us to begin pumping. However, they had some issues with, they had a contractor already mobilized repairing some of the concrete structures where their stormwater pipes go under driveways. So they couldn't allow us to begin pumping until last Friday at 8 a.m., which is when we began pumping. We're currently pumping approximately 16 million gallons a day of water flowing by gravity. We're basically helping Mother Nature. That's how our canals in the North Cape are replenished, is through Gator Slough. It's right by the Dollar General store. If you're ever driving on 41, you hang a left on Del Prado heading towards Charlotte. It's that Dollar General store is right next to Gator Slough. Those canals, the swells, on both sides of 41 feed our canals during the rainy season. And so, and when it's not the rainy season, however, they were completely dried up. There was no flow going through them. And so we were able to start that up, get that going, and we're pumping. Some of the other initiatives that I've taken is to begin pumping. We have 2 interconnects, one at each of the water reclamation facilities, or wastewater plants, as most people call them. And we can pump about 4 million gallons a day from both of those connections of drinking water, which we have been doing for a few weeks now, even before we started pumping from FDOT. Code enforcement has stepped up enforcement. I've seen the number of violations continually to increase. And also, we are pumping approximately 2.5 million gallons a day from our interconnect with FGUA from the North Fort Myers water reclamation facility. So we've tapped into every source that we can possibly tap into and are trying to make it weather this extreme drought. Right now, we're about 6 to 7 inches below normal, which has severely impacted our canals. And so I have not seen that we keep a historical trend chart of our canal levels, and we are actually trending very closely to the 2007 drought that we had, which is one of the worst ones that we've ever recorded. I was actually in Charlotte County when that happened, and we actually were running out of drinking water at Charlotte County. They have one of the largest aquifer storage and recovery well field there, which they can pull out water from that well field. However, they were pulling the well water out that didn't even meet secondary drinking water quality standards. So because they were running out of water, since that time they built a reservoir and have not had those issues any longer. But this reservoir up in Charlotte County has really helped us. This marks the, I believe, the fourth time that we pumped. We first did it in 2017. We did it again in 2020 and 21 for short durations. So we've got a lot of good data from that, and it's definitely helping. And also, we can go back after we get the pipeline in. What I'd like to do is get those limiting conditions off of our permit, those trigger points, once we have the dedicated pipeline in, and be able to pump when we believe we need to start pumping ahead of time before there's an issue. And also, of course, the Fort Myers interconnect will be completed, I anticipate, by next year, which will give us an additional 6 million a day, up to 12 million a day. And so the future is bright with our supply. It's just a matter of getting to the finish line. We're on the 5-yard line. We're real close.
Councilmember Nelson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Jeff. So I think it's really important, you mentioned about the trigger points and you mentioned about the proactivity and the inability for us to be proactive before this became an issue because of those trigger points. In other words, that was required. Before we could apply for the permits, it was required. I had reached out to Maureen yesterday because I had two constituents that voiced concerns that we had waited too long, like we weren't paying attention, and so I had to say to them, no, we couldn't apply until we reached these certain levels. The other thing that Maureen enlightened me on yesterday was that once we applied for the permits, I guess we were required, there were more requirements than normal. So once we applied for the permits, then FDP came back to us and said, we need more information. Can you talk a little bit about what that more information was?
I think there was one request for additional information, and we answered that very quickly. But the biggest roadblock, I must say, was I had driven out there to look at everything. I like to get eyes on the situation, and I noticed a contractor out there, and I was like, what is this contractor doing out here? Because FDOT didn't say a word to us when we met with them a week prior. And so I inquired about it with FDOT, and they said, oh, we forgot about that. We forgot we have a contractor out there fixing the concrete structures. So they said, we can't allow you to start pumping until they complete their work. And
Okay.
that was the biggest holdup.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
I'm trying to go off of memory, Jeff. As far as bringing the water down from Charlotte County in the swales, is it about 40% that we lose? And I know that's why we want to build the pipeline so we get 100% of the water. But just off of memory, I was trying to remember out of that 16 million a day or whatever you mentioned that we were pumping, how much of that are we actually losing?
Mayor, I think it's the few times that we've pumped, the last time I heard the numbers actually improved, we were more like about 30% losses. Especially when we first start pumping, because the water is percolating down into the dry ground and the swells. And so also with evaporation, you don't get 100% every drop. And then of course, that water has to travel a number of miles to get to our canal pump stations. But fortunately, we now have Canal Pump Station 10, which was built with the North 2 UEP, and that one allows us to pick that water up before we pump it under Pine Island Road through the North-South transfer station, and so that's helped us tremendously. And then We're going to be completing the Pine Island Road, 2 5 million gallon tanks and high service pump station. That's going to be done in another month and a half, 2 months. And that's going to give us additional ability to keep pressures up and additional storage, 10 million gallons of additional storage. So also with our Weir 29 project that's underway right now, that's going to allow us to store more water in our freshwater canals, up to about 900 million gallons additional water by putting in a new control structure. It's called Weir 29. It's related to the Yellow Fever Creek Reservoir that we partnered with Lee County on to allow them to improve water quality downstream in Yellow Fever Creek and in the river by impounding some of that water. You probably, if you've driven Del Prado, you've seen that new, there's a new reservoir there. There's a little driveway going into Yellow Fever. We partnered with them to allow them to do that, and then they supported us on putting in the Weir 29. So it was really a win-win initiative. Once that's online, and then we get the rainy season, we're going to have more storage, which will also help us tremendously, and that'll all be done by next dry season.
So Weir 29 construction should be completed here within the year then?
Yes, before next dry season.
And what's your anticipated completion time for the pipeline coming from Charlotte County? I know we're applying for the funding, but when do you feel that we'll have that project completed?
The design is at about 60% right now, and so we anticipate having 100% design by August, and so shortly after, budget and, financing permitting, then hopefully we can start construction beginning at the end of this year or first part of next year. And it would take probably, I would say, at least 24 months or 12 months to construct it. It's about 3.5 miles of pipe and a pump station there at the reservoir. But the intervening variable on that project is that we have to have a long-term agreement, and we don't have that yet.
Yeah, because now we only have a 20-year agreement. I guess we want to expand that before we spend a lot of money on that project.
We have a 3-year agreement at the moment that we just extended, and we've been seeking I thought we were seeking like a 50-year agreement.
Yes, sir.
And the property owner at that time was reluctant to enter into a long-term agreement with us because they were going through the process of rezoning the property and changing the land use on the property. And so I'm hoping that they are now at a point where they are willing to enter into a long-term agreement with us.
So if we get that agreement, we're looking at about 18 months probably from now before we have that actually up and running.
Correct.
And then we have the pipeline that hopefully you said would be completed by the end of next year.
The yes, that one of course, we had to rebid the subaqueous portion. We've got the bid back. I believe Mark and his staff are going to be bringing that back at the next council meeting, May 4th, I believe.
Okay. All right. So hopefully we'll have the construction of that completed by the end of next year.
Yes, sir. Probably toward the end of summer next year or middle of summer.
Now, if you look at the Weir 29 project, you look at the 18 months for the Charlotte County pipeline, if we get that completed, and we look at the Calusa crossing pipeline, we get those all up and running. Are you pretty confident that we'll have the adequate water supply for the future, that the demand that we will be asking for in the future?
I am confident that in the near term, we'll have sufficient to meet our projected growth. But will we have enough for 100% build out? That will depend upon the other ordinance that I'm going to be bringing forward. also getting the message out about conservation. But in my opinion, the reservoir and the potential for tapping into the water that up in Cecil Webb and Babcock, the Fish and Wildlife Department, they have plans to build what's called the Bond Farm Reservoir, which is going to be adjacent to the Southwest Aggregates Reservoir. And that is designed to hold water from the Cecil Webb area. There's about 7 to 9 billion gallons of water that has nowhere to go. It's killing the trees, it's killing the wildlife, the quail population has left. So the plan is, the goal is to continue working with the state and the stakeholders because the Yucca Pens area, which is a big area, in the Northwest Cape, it's an environmental area that is actually too dry. They need some of that water. They want to pump some of that water over into Yucca Pens, and the remaining water we could pump to our canal, which is Gator Slough. So that's the ultimate goal. And if the key is, if we can keep those canals full year round, we won't have any issues. And also, I talked to my staff, I would like to use some of that water to blend with our RO groundwater, brackish water, and use that for drinking water as well. And I think I 100% believe that if that happens, we will have enough water for build out.
And what was the name of that project again? That reservoir that you were talking about?
It's called the Bond Farm Reservoir, and there's actually a group that's been formed by a number of stakeholders, including Charlotte County, Lee County, Cape Coral. It's called the Charlotte Flatwoods Initiative, to take that water, that 7 to 9 billion gallons of water that's estimated that has nowhere to go, and pump that to where it used to go, flow naturally before man came and started changing the flow of water. It used to flow south, southwest, and west, and we changed that. And so basically what we're trying to do is turn an environmental liability into an environmental asset, because we got a big hole in the ground at Southwest Aggregates that has tremendous potential for our city, and by turning that liability into an asset would be great for us. I mean, it's really, I feel like it's the future of our water supply.
Now, is that something that I guess there will probably be some state agencies involved and possibly some state funding that'll need to be taking place in order to make that project a viable project?
Absolutely, and it's a wonderful project. I mean, because we're going to help the Charlotte Flatwoods area. We're going to, which is an environmental issue. We're going to help the Yucca Pens area, which is another environmental issue. And we're going to help Cape Coral's canals, which is another environmental issue. So we're going to kill 3 birds with 1 stone.
And maybe if you could you and I can meet, you can give me some more information on it. It's the first I've heard of this project.
I'd love to.
And definitely, in my travels and meeting with our state reps and our senators, that may be a project that I can advocate for, but I'd need to get a little more information on that first.
Sounds great, Mayor. I'd love to take you on a tour out there and show you exactly. I can show you everything.
Okay, that sounds
then
great.
you'll have it in your mind's eye as well.
We'll have to plan that. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Any other questions for Mr. Pearson? Seeing none, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is 4B4, new human resource information system. Mr. City Manager.
So, Mr. Mayor, as if we haven't gone through enough software and technology transitions, we have another one on the horizon. That is very important to the enterprise. And so I'm going to have Lisa Senego, your Human Resources Director, come up to the podium, and she'll be assisted by appropriate staff. But this is the next major software transition that we have to go through, and it involves our human resources information system and also our payroll and timekeeping system. So it is extremely important, it's extremely critical that we get this right for obvious reasons, just like every software IT transition. And so now I'm going to have Lisa come to the podium and walk you through why we're having this discussion today and how we intend on proceeding. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Mark Mason, Financial Services Director. I don't think we told him who was actually going to be doing this, so I apologize.
Today, so they
Need
got
the
me.
mirror.
We're both here.
Yes, but we are both here, and so just as a reminder, several years ago we went with the Tyler Munis system for financial services for the general ledger and accounts payable system, purchasing system, and from there we've added in the EnerGov system, and I think EnerGov actually started this train, and then we went with the Tyler Munis, and then we've also added the Enterprise Asset Management System as well. And so we've purchased these things in early 2019. We've implemented them over the last several years. We're live in the Tyler Munis accounting system and utility billing system, and now the EnerGov system and Enterprise Asset Management System was quietly implemented, I believe, earlier this year. The Tyler Munis software is scalable. There's things you can add to it, and of course, the Human Resources Information System and Payroll System is one of those that is needed to be added to the system. So our current vendor, which is Kronos, is sunsetting on 4/30/2024. They were originally scheduled to sunset on 4/30/2025, so we thought we had at least a couple of years in order to do this, but now it's been pulled up. We've had 12 months pulled out from underneath our feet, so it's important that we get on board with this and start running now. We can't even, just gradually move up to this. So we've evaluated this new system. Tyler Munis was chosen. When I say we evaluated it, we've looked at other ERP systems. We also looked at the Kronos product. When they're sunsetting this product, they actually came out with a brand new product, which would require us to go through a full implementation as well. And so when we were looking at the new Kronos product and we were looking at the Tyler Munis HRIS and payroll system, we looked at it from an integration standpoint and what benefits we would end up getting from that. And so when we looked at, and then we also looked at the outsourcing, which you heard me talk a little bit about earlier, with Paycom, and we chose the Tyler ERP system from its integration standpoint and the things that we're going to be able to do with it, which I think would be very important for us. So the business needs evaluation was done. It was completed by HR with their portion of it, finance with their portion, which is the payroll portion, and IT also looked at their portion, which is, how much equipment that we need? Do we have the staff necessary in order to be able to operate the system? So we're looking at a go-live target date of January 1, 2024. This will be for both the city and the charter schools, so we're going to be implementing two systems at one time as opposed to just one. So what I'm going to be talking about here is about dedication of resources towards the implementation of new software systems. My experience in doing this is that in order to implement a system, you need the dedication of resources. And when I say dedication of resources, I'm talking about having somebody doing this every single day, right up till the day that they go live. And this is 8 hours a day. This is 8 hour days of setting up the system, making sure that they're testing the system, that the transactions are going through the system correctly, and that what we're looking to get out of the system is exactly how we've set up the system. And so from a staffing standpoint, human resources and the HRIS system, the HR information system is about all of the employees and having all the data in the system in order to have the payroll actually function correctly. And so For human resources, they're going to be looking at bringing on at least one additional staff member. We are already looking at another one for an overlap period for one of the retiring employees, but we're going to need a new compensation specialist in order to be able to pull this off. And this allows then one of the staff members that have been with the city for a number of years to dedicate their resource time towards the implementation of this system. In other words, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, every single day that our staff and the Tyler Munis staff is available for the implementation. For financial services, the payroll supervisor would be the dedicated resource for our systems because it's payroll. And so I would be looking at potentially bringing on an additional payroll specialist because we operate payroll every day. If we're not doing the city's payroll, we're doing the payroll for the charter school system. So every single day of the week, we're in the process of preparing or processing a payroll. And so we would be looking at an additional staff member in order to support the review process as well as the calculations for payroll that we currently do. The funding for the system, the total cost of the system is about $853,000. This would be split between the city and the charter school system. As you'll recall, last year in September of 2021, we separated the charter school system into its own environment, which, by the way, they love having their own environment. And so with that own environment, they also need their own HRIS system as well as the payroll system to actually operate. So for us, we would pick up $731,000 of the cost, and because they have about 300 or so employees, and we looked at this straight up on employees, number of employees, and the split for the cost of this system, they would pick up $122,000. So I've spoken with the superintendent of the charter school system. She's aware of this and will be included in their upcoming fiscal year 2023 budget. So again, for the Tyler Munis for payroll, this would integrate both the finance and the human resources functions for what I would consider to be a much smoother payroll experience for its employees, the timekeepers, and the HR and the finance payroll administrators. There are going to be, having an integrated system is going to allow us to do many things from an efficiency standpoint that we currently can't do. One of those is having direct charges from a timekeeping standpoint, where if I've got somebody working on a project, we'll be able to actually put the project information in there and be able to charge it directly to the project. Currently, we can't do that. Currently, it requires us to take the information, go into the payroll system, download the information, put it over into a spreadsheet, calculate the hours on a percentage basis, do a journal entry, put it into the system. And so that will actually, free up a lot of time and create efficiencies. The automated workflows and the integrations with the Microsoft tools that we'll have available to us, the custom pages that we'll be able to operate off of, will literally allow us to execute many routine tasks much more efficiently than we're currently doing. And so one of the things that led us to utilizing this system, within the HR system, they use Bentech for self-service benefit enrollment. They also use the SABA performance and training modules, as well as NeoGov, which is the recruitment tool. All three of these integrates with Munis. So this should allow us to, again, create many more efficiencies utilizing the system. And of course, again, I simply cannot impress enough the need to have the dedication of the resources to be able to put this in place in the very short period of time that we're going to be dealing with. And so, here for any questions.
So, Mr. Mayor, in addition to the dedicating the necessary staffing resources, I'm going to talk to you in just a little bit when we give you an update on where we are with Intergov. I'm going to look at the possibility of having a third party integrator on board to also assist in this transition. They serve as an independent eyes and ears to help organizations when they go through these types of transitions.
Yeah, we worked with the company that he's talking about. We worked with a company when we were doing the implementation of the Tyler Munis accounting system. So absolutely, this will be something that will be very beneficial for us. because they have the knowledge and the skills of setting up the system correctly and making sure that it's set up correctly. Thank you.
Councilmember Welsh.
Thank you. It's showing here you're asking for 3 additional staff members, but on the next slide you say that this is going to integrate everything and save time. If we're saving time and integrating everything, why are we adding more staff?
The compensation and classifications, frankly, just the growth would have required us to add staff, but the compensation and classification specialists are primarily associated with the growth of the system and the number of different classification studies that we do on a regular basis for, I think, actually Lisa could talk better about it than I can, but from a payroll standpoint, the person that I would be looking at if I bring them on board, and this is an if, it's whether, it's how much the growth of the system will require us to dedicate more resources to validate the information that's being put into the system. Remember, timekeeping is the basis for making for paying people. And so you need to validate the information that's being put into the system every single time that we go through the payroll cycle.
And so, Councilmember Welch, you bring up a very good question. And one of the things, and I know we've talked about this before, we're a growing city. I think all in all, when you add all of the employees now in the charter school system that we're responsible for, I think that brings us, Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, to well over 1,900 employees that we have to support. And we have not kept pace with the central service support that we need in order to keep an organization as large as us operating. And so we haven't added resources to HR in years. Finance finally got a couple of extra resources this past budget year, but we're at the point now that we can't continue to operate this organization with a skeleton staff in some of these key support areas. And so I know I mentioned that to you when we went through the budget process this year, and we're just getting to the point where we have to add more support staff, because fire is growing, PD is growing, parks is growing, all of our line departments are growing, but our support agencies have not kept up with that growth. And so we're at the point now where we're going to have to add more IT people, more HR people. Finance, I think we're taking care of okay, but it's just the needs of a growing city.
Yeah, no, I understand. It was just a strange that it went from that slide to the next to being, adding more staff and then becoming more efficient. So I agree. We do need to keep our support staff. That was it. Thank you.
Yeah, one thing I want to make sure, and it looks like we're kind of addressing it this time, when you look at the InterGov system, and I know you're going to be updating us on that, we probably fell short in some areas on that, so hopefully we learn from that. I think it's very important to maybe have that third-party company that you discussed. That's what they do. They integrate that system and whatever that system is into the organization. So I think that's going to be key. Also, I think the other key item that you mentioned was have a dedicated employee that specifically works on that process every single day. Mm-hmm. And I think they were some of the shortcomings that we may have missed out on when it comes to the InterGov system. So I'm glad to see that moving forward, because like any other policy change or whatever type of change it is, you want that smooth transition. So whatever we need to do to have that smooth transition, even if it costs us a few more dollars up front, I think it's going to save us a lot on the back end. So I think it's the way to go for sure. Council Member Tate.
This is the latest version that we're going to be purchasing?
It is. Just to answer the question, we're going to be upgrading the system here shortly because we implemented 2019's version, but we're going to be implementing the 2021 version, so it'll be the latest version at the time that we do the implementation and it goes live.
For this one that we're talking about, because
For the HR system, correct. It will be.
Yeah, we don't want to have unhappy employees like we have in the buildings.
I think from a dedication standpoint, when we did the implementation for the charter school, we dedicated the staff necessary because
Right.
the experience I have with doing this is that the more dedication you have of your staff time, the more dedication you're going to get from the other side, which is the owner of the software system. So they're going to put forth the same level of effort you're going to put forth in order to get this thing in place in the time that we need it. And we're having this other company coming in, will be, and looking over our shoulder and helping us and, being there and a resource for us to ask questions from a setup standpoint is very important, because one of the things that we understand is that we may not actually speak the same language as the company that owns the software. And so, we know what we want. Sometimes it's hard to articulate it because they're utilizing a different phraseology in their setup of the system. And so we need to understand exactly what they mean in many cases of how that works. And this integrator or this company and these people that have done this, generally understand both sides of the equation and understanding the language on both sides.
And Mr. City Manager, how quickly do you think we'll be able to get a third-party integrator on board?
So I'm going to talk to you about that in just a couple of minutes. We're currently interviewing companies now. I don't want to assume that a company that we bring on to do the InterGov module will be the same company that does this, but I will bet you that it will probably be one and the same. They generally have the expertise to do these ERP implementations regardless of the module, but I don't want to commit to that right now.
And are they do they become an in-house, or do they work from wherever they're working and just communicate?
So they do both. So they have people come to, they're actually physically on site, but they also do a lot of work remotely, because now in an IT environment, a lot of that work is done remotely. And with Microsoft Teams,
Yeah,
there's.
know that. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Mason.
Thank you.
Ms. Zanega. Okay, the next topic of discussion is 4B5, InterGov. Update, Mr. City Manager.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. So as you indicated, we've been briefing you regularly on where we are with our progress in rolling out the InterGov system and addressing the backlog in permits that the transition to InterGov contributed to, but was not solely the result of. And so what we want to do now is I'm going to have Matt Grambaugh come up to the podium, and I've tasked Matt to be the city manager's eyes and ears with respect to this particular program, and to help us better coordinate among departments and better coordinate our strategy for dealing with some of the issues that we've been dealing with for better part of 2 months now. And so Matt's also going to synthesize for you, I think, the findings that we have discovered thus far throughout this process and our game plan for moving forward to hopefully fix the issues that we are fixing. And as I said before, Mr. Mayor, I understand the industry is frustrated. We're equally frustrated. We want to get this thing right. We don't like having unhappy customers. We don't like having glitches in our system where permits are being unnecessarily delayed. We have professionals in our development services department that want to do a good job for our customers, and we just want to process the work, and we want to get this fixed. And so Matt's going to outline for you what we've been working on lately. I want to assure the industry and assure the council, but I know council, you've been very supportive, and you know that we've been doing everything that we possibly can. We've taken this extremely seriously. And we intend to fix it. And as I said before, I have no doubt that this will be fixed. The InterGov product is a good product that's used extensively throughout North America by users larger than us and smaller than us. And so the product works. And so we just have to make sure that we tailor our business processes to take advantage of all the opportunities that InterGov offers. And so Matt, take it away from here.
Good morning, Honorable Mayor, City Council members. Matthew Grambaugh, Special Projects Coordinator in the City Manager's Office. And as the City Manager just expressed, I'm here today to speak to staff's current and ongoing actions to address many of the issues that we've experienced and categorized for the city's EnerGov system. So as a brief overview of our transition with EnerGov so far, back in 2018, the city selected Tyler Technologies EnerGov as the enterprise permitting and licensing system to replace the Trackit system. And over a 3-year period of time, the city worked with Tyler Technologies on configuration and training for the new platform, starting in early 2019 through launch in February of 2022. From the 16th of February of this year through the 21st, the city phased out the Trackit system and migrated over 5,000 legacy permits from Trackit to EnerGov over that 6-day period. And on February 22nd, the EnerGov Citizen Self-Service System portal went live. After the first few weeks of operating under the new system and working through initial hiccups, the city determined to take a permit pause for certain types of permits to clear a backlog that had developed, and staff over a 9-day period processed nearly 5,000 permits and issued over 2,000 permits, including working over the Easter holiday weekend. Since going live on the 22nd of February, the city has received over 10,000 permits and has issued over 7,500 permits. So the new working group that's been established to identify and address issues with EnerGov has categorized all of the issues that we're experiencing into 5 categories of issues: workflow issues, configuration issues, reporting issues, system performance and speed issues, as well as some training issues. The work group is focused on identifying issues that we've experienced, as well as potentially future issues as the system continues to be implemented and developed, and to really break down a comprehensive strategy for addressing every type of issue and ensure continuous improvement so that citizens are able to get their permits processed faster with our staff. So in terms of addressing the different types of issues, currently when we're addressing speed and performance issues, over the last 7 days recently, and truly throughout the entire process, IT's been making several software-based changes to improve system performance. They meet at the end of business every day to review how those changes have affected performance, as well as working with staff in the department, the Development Services Department, to see what their observations are. DSD staff are making those performance improvement observations and reporting them to IT as well as to DSD management, and that information is all compiled and discussed. And when a change is made on the software side of things, IT marks it with a time. So if a change is made and at 3/16 they experience something, they're able to determine in a cause and effect manner whether the change improved, made things worse, or caused any other types of hiccups. Additionally, Tyler Technologies, which we've been working very closely with on addressing the issues that we are experiencing, are of the opinion that many of the speed and performance issues can be resolved through a major software update, updating to the most recent version. However, this would cause an impact to the city's utility billing platform. So IT is currently working with Tyler to see how feasible it would be to migrate customer information, including usernames, passwords, billing details, to the updated version to avoid any disruption for clients who are currently enrolled in the online billing system. If they're able to do that, customers should have an easy transition to the latest version, and the city won't lose any online customers. But that's something that we're still working with Tyler on determining the feasibility of that type of update. For addressing the issues related to both process and workflow, staff are currently evaluating and beginning to reconfigure the review and approval process for several types of permits. The real goal of this is to streamline the city's internal EnerGov processes for more efficient reviews and approvals, which would mean faster issuance of permits for our residents and contractors. The working group has determined that the first type of permit to be selected for streamlining will be the roofing permits. The city currently receives between 600 and 700 new roofing permits per week, and in terms of complexity, it's right in the middle. So it's a good first option for reconfiguring within EnerGov because it's not the most complicated type of permit to do, and there's a large volume. So by reconfiguring that and improving the speed at which staff are able to process those types of permits through Intergov, that's going to have an immediate impact in terms of how fast those permits can be processed. Additionally, that'll set up the city to be able to address the largest issue, which is your single-family home permits and the backlog that we currently are experiencing for those. By doing the roofing permits first and developing experience going into the live Intergov system and adjusting the workflow, we'll be able to, as soon as that's completed, move on to single-family homes, which are more complicated, and not be able to have any really negative effect when we're adjusting the workflow for the single-family home permits. So currently, the plan is to complete the roofing permit reconfiguration. We're meeting this week on developing a new workflow for that type of permit, and then to streamline the more complex single-family home permit process, as well as to continue to improve system performance and speed with the ID department in collaboration with Tyler. Additionally, to be able to process additional permits, DSD is also looking to hire 1 or 2 additional permit coordinators, and one of those positions is currently posted. Continuing our discussion of addressing the different types of issues that we've determined exist with the current Intergov system are the reporting, training, and education issues. Currently, on the reporting side, IT is scheduling demos of the report generating system for DSD staff to use to ensure that staff are trained in how to generate the reports that are needed, which will allow us to have really accurate, good information that we can feed back into determining whether we're making progress on each different type of issue, especially on the technical side of things. We are also planning to prepare outreach materials and additional information for both contractors and residents on how using the customer self-service system, the CSS system, rather than walk-in, will enable them to receive their permits more quickly. That's a real key point for us, is to show and to communicate that the fastest way to have your permit processed is to use the CSS system rather than walk-ins. Walk-ins are still coming in and their permits are being worked on, but in terms of a pure efficiency and speed point of view, it is best to use the CSS system rather than walking in. Staff is also planning to submit a weekly high-level update memo to stakeholders, including the CCCIA and other industry groups, regarding progress on addressing the issues that we've identified, as well as communicate ways that they can improve their experience and turnaround time. It's really important for us throughout this process, as we're addressing the different issues, to engage with the community, engage with the users who are on the user side of things, and to make sure that we're all doing everything that we can to collaborate and work to decrease permit times, because that's what everyone wants to do. As the city manager was speaking about earlier, the working group's also evaluating the possibility of hiring a third-party integrator. We're looking at consulting companies and service providers that focus on enterprise permitting and licensing system, which is what Intergov is. In particular, organizations that have experience with implementing Intergov post-go live. And in our research, we've identified many local governments that have successfully utilized such a service, especially with Intergov. And there's a list on the PowerPoint here of all the different units of local government that have successfully done this. So we are in contact right now. We have other additional research that we're conducting, and we're making sure that we are able to create a list of providers that will be able to best meet the unique needs that we're facing. The Intergov working group is also planning to conduct a couple site visits in the near future. We're currently scheduling visits to municipalities that have successfully implemented a comparable version of Intergov. And the goal of these visits is to identify process improvements as well as best practices that we can implement quickly to improve performance and reduce our permit processing times. And I believe that the first site visit will be next week and should be able to gather some good and needed information from that experience. And finally, we are looking to increase our staff's capacity to process permits in a more timely manner, as well as to improve and continuously improve the Intergov system. DSD, as I mentioned earlier, is currently hiring an additional permit coordinator. One position is posted, and we're considering another position after that. And IT is developing a position description for an Intergov administrator. This type of position is common at municipalities that have successfully implemented an EnerGov system. And the responsibilities would include, obviously, day-to-day monitoring and operation, short and long-term optimization and process improvements. But the position would also have growth and functionality planning responsibilities so that they're able to be proactive and identify issues that may come about due to growth, additional permits being received, just so that we can be ahead of the game in terms of identifying potential issues in the future to smooth implementation of new versions of EnerGov or other ERP systems that the city would procure when they would be purchased. So with that, thank you, and I'm available for any questions.
So I'm going to have Mr. Mayor, Matt, Vince, and Michelle Hoffman available to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Councilmember Tate.
I think my question might be for Vince. Thank you, Matt. That was a great presentation. So, like we're doing the roofing, I think that's really great that you're going to streamline the roofing permits. Is there any way to do that with the master plans for different single-family contractors like D.R. Horton and Christopher Allen and LGI that do the same home over and over again? I know that their lot is different each time, but as far as their plans, is there a way that we can fast-track those over all the custom properties?
That's part of the mix. That'll be done when we do single family. We're going to be looking at that comprehensively.
Okay, so that is a possibility that y'all are going to be looking at.
Yes, but not the first step.
Okay, the first step is the roofs.
You're right.
Is the
Yes.
roofs.
I want to get that one right before we expand to other categories.
Okay, well, we want to get it right, that's for certain. Thank you to your team, Vince. I know that it's been a struggle.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, for the presentation. It was a great presentation. Vince, I probably have a question for you as well. You know, when you look at, I think what we have to try to do is make sure that we take what I would say is the low-lying fruit permits, the ones that are the easy permits, to take them and possibly streamline them, very similar to what you did with the roofing. Some of the other permits that, you know, I think about that could be put in that category are permits that are stamped by engineer. Those particular permits, actually, when they come in for review, you know, we have staff members that are less qualified than a stamped engineer. And once those plans are stamped by an engineer, that liability is automatically transferred to that engineer. So when you look at permits, they could be permits similar to storm shutters. They are permits that could be similar to seawalls, that we have to be site-specific, and they have to be stamped by an engineer. Pools have to be stamped by an engineer. Those particular type of permits, I think we could streamline as well because they're stamped by engineers. We may have to look at the site, make sure they meet the setback requirements and things like that, but I think other than that, I think they're very site-specific, and we could possibly free up some of those permits. Fence permits could be something similar as well. I know we talked about having applicants, whether it's a homeowner or a contractor, sign affidavits that they're responsible for the building code requirements. I think if we could get some of those easier permits out of the way as far as our review times, it gives us the opportunity to focus our staff on the more detailed type permits like new single-family residential home permits. So my question is, are we going to expand? I know we're using roofing pretty much as a first step, and probably to use it to see how it's working, what we're going to need to do once we've identified that, and how long will that process be when we'll be analyzing the roofing permits? How long will that process be, and will we be looking to expand that to possibly other permits in the future?
I can't give you a timeline on how long that process will take. We're going to try to do it expeditiously as possible. As far as the items that you mentioned, I'm going to have to defer to the building official. I'm not comfortable making a statement that when you start talking about an engineer stamping on whether or not it should be reviewed or not, that's been a discussion that has been gone on for years in every community I've worked in Florida. And the building official plays a major role in what the review will be. If we're getting into a private provider type review that is allowed by statute, that's a completely different issue. If it's part of the design professional's work in a package, whether it's commercial, industrial, or residential, I don't know the answer to your question, but I would like to explore it more with the building official. And seawalls, as you well know, are not part of the building code. That one I think is a lot easier. The ones that you mentioned that are part of the building code, I'm not sure. We need to speak with our building official about it.
Yeah, and I know, and maybe many of us that sit here don't really realize that when it comes to the building official, really, even the city manager has very little control over the building official. So whatever policies that we have to make sure that he is comfortable, he or she, whoever's in that position, is comfortable moving forward. But I think it at least we should entertain the discussion to see what we can do to possibly streamline some of those permits.
I agree with you completely on that issue.
Yeah.
And that will happen.
And that's why I mentioned it. I think the InterGov system that we went to, I think it will work. I think, we have some room for improvement as we've heard in Matt's presentation. And I think we will get there. Unfortunately, until we get there, then we'll have the responsibility to make sure that there's other avenues like walk-ins and things of that nature until I think the CSS program will work and be more efficient. I don't think we're 100% there yet, and that's why I think some of the walk-ins are going to need to take place during this transition time. The master plans that Councilmember Tate, I think, is another important. What some people don't realize is when you have a master plan, that really is based on the building aspect of the project. There's still many other aspects that need to be reviewed, whether it's zoning and many other right-of-ways and things of that nature has to be looked at. So, I think that we're on the right course, and hopefully we can identify what our shortcomings are, what improvements we can make to streamline the process along the way. And at some point, I think what we really need to do is identify timelines. What is our goal? Because once you define what the timeline is, then you can look at the process and see what needs to change, how much more manpower, if any, that we're going to need, how many additional plan reviewers, how many people at the desk. So I think once we say, okay, our goal is, say, single-family residential homes, new ones. If our timeline is, 15 days of review or whatever it is, that will almost tell us what we're going to need in place in order to make that happen. So I think at some point we need to sit down, have that conversation. What is our goal? And then once we define exactly what our goal is, I think it will tell us what we're going to have to implement to get to that goal. So I'm hoping to see that sometime in the near future as well.
I don't have anything really more to add than that, except a caveat. You can set a goal, but that's what it should be. You're going to have ebbs and flows in the permitting system that's going to cause stress in those areas. If you set your goal at 15 days and all of a sudden you're at 25 because of a building boom, okay.
Yeah, I understand that, but my point was, I think we have to have a goal, whatever that, I just use 15 days. If it's 25 or 30 days or whatever our goal is, I think you got to have that goal set, and that will kind of tell us what we're going to have to do in the meantime to be able to make that goal. You know, it's just like any type of business that is trying to provide a service, that they set a goal for that service. Once you set that goal, then there's different parameters that you're going to have to make sure you meet, or you'll never make that goal.
Oh, I understand. I don't want the council to think that we don't have a goal. We do. It's the state statute. And it has to be that way right now until we can figure out what the new normal is going to be.
Right.
I know people are not satisfied with that. I'm acutely aware of that. We need to take steps to improve. I understand that completely.
And I guess I'm respectfully disagree with you on that aspect, because we have a state mandated regulation where we have to be. For me, that's not where we should be. To me, that's where, at a last resort, that's where we should be. So I guess I disagree with you there. I know we go under that pretext now that, hey, we have X amount of days. I just don't know as an organization. I know that's where we are now. I don't know if that's where we should be in the future, is where I'm thinking that you and I.
Mr. Mayor, sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you, but I think we can bring that back at a later date. Certainly, we can look at, and I think that'll be a good cow discussion item, and that is to sit down with you, because I'm not sure all of you know what those state mandated goals are, because I currently don't know what they are off the top of my head. And I'd like to also have a little bit of time to take a snapshot of where we are today and be able to report back to you on, I'll come up with some crazy, exactly, you know, how many days does it take to process a permit from start to finish, right? And so I'd like to find out where we are today and then compare it to what the state statute requires. And then we can have a conversation about, you know, do we want to, how much improvement do we want over the state mandate? And so I think it's a good conversation we're having today. I'd like to bring that back to you at an upcoming CAL session, or maybe as we go through the budget development process, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I mean, because, you know, everything costs money. And when we're talking the budget, if we have a goal set and say we need an additional 5 employees, then that's a budget impact, and that's what we have.
And this actually goes beyond just the topic that we're just discussing today. In our strategic plan, we've actually, in one of the waypoints that we've identified, we believe that we need to bring back a performance management and measurement system that this city used to have, but for whatever reason we did away with. And the mark of any good organization is you've got to be able to track those key metrics that are important to the organization. And so we're just talking about building today, but it goes beyond building. Mm-hmm. And we need to establish those performance metrics that are going to help you make decisions as to what you want to fund and to what level. But I want to start with at least building, since building is the salient topic that before us. So I do plan to bring that back.
Sounds great. Councilmember Welsh?
Yeah, my question, I believe one of the slides you had up there mentioned that the performance issues can be fixed with a software update. Is that something that we're going to see every year? Is that we'll have to have another update, another purchase on this, or is this something that is scalable?
So it's not necessarily, and Michelle can correct me if I'm wrong, so we have purchased the Tyler product, and as part of that, we also get ongoing system maintenance, which provides us with updates on a regular basis at no extra charge, okay? But again, Michelle can correct me on that. Right now, we have implemented the version of the system that was available to us at the time we started our transition to Intergov. So remember, we started this back in 2018 is when we got city council approval. We actually started working on it back in 2019. But since then, Tyler migrated to a new version. And so they want us to go to the new version. And as Matt mentioned before, we're concerned with some of the impacts it's going to have on our utility billing customers. And before we make a decision as to whether we want to go to the latest version, I need to make sure that I'm not going to have our utility billing customers go through another round of having to put in their usernames and passwords, Okay, so we need to get that fixed before we have the discussion with Tyler about upgrading to the new version. Tyler has also identified some other aspects that I don't want to get into here in the public setting that we may want to consider as well. That's on the table, but we're not there yet. We want to make sure that we get these little kinks worked out before we migrate to the new version and before we consider some of the other recommendations that they've made for us.
Yeah, because in the two businesses that I have, we use software, and it seems that most software now is going to subscription-based services,
Correct.
so that everyone is on the newest and greatest version.
Correct.
So I just I didn't know how close, government entities were to that type of service, so
And
maybe.
we do that. We have, they're called, Michelle, what do they call them? Software
Software as a
system
service, yeah, software as a service, SaaS, Michelle Hoffman, IT director. Yes, and Tyler does offer that, but when we did the evaluation of cost benefit back in 2018, it was more expensive to use the SaaS model. So.
Yeah, I just want to, I'm seeing that we're switching to Tyler for the HRIS, and we're going to have the Tyler product for the EnerGov, and I'm hoping all these integrate together so that we don't have, now that we're taking these steps to get to this, that as the newer versions come in, hopefully it makes smoother transitions. So
Right.
I'd like to talk with you more, city manager, about the subscription services and stuff like that.
Yeah, and so Michelle just brought something to mind that I wasn't aware of. I thought that we had a system and service maintenance agreement that entitles us to all of the.
We do.
So are we entitled to the next upgrade?
All the upgrades are included going forward,
Okay, all right.
and it's Tyler's going to start issuing quarterly software updates. So
Yeah.
we'll be uploading these things 4 times a year, and they're working on tighter integration again across all of their products, which is why the EnerGov upgrade will impact the utility billing people because they're trying to get to one module.
Yeah, excellent, thank you.
Councilmember Hayden.
So I guess just to follow up on that, Matt, with that particular point you mentioned about the software upgrade in the system, can we, even with all the streamlining or workflow efficiencies that we're looking at, can we ever get to where we want to be if we don't upgrade the system with the software? If they're making the point that a lot of your problems may go away with the upgrade, no matter what we do now, is it going to be enough to get us where we need to be in terms of that, workflow stability and efficiency and all that? That'd be my question. I completely understand with utility billing, we don't want to go through that again, but it sounds like we're going to be kind of fighting against ourselves here if we don't do this upgrade.
Well, it sounds to me that the upgrade will help with the system performance issues that we are experiencing. It will not address workflow and workflow configuration, okay? That's on us. We need to fix that. So that's whether we're on the current version or the next version or even the previous version for that matter. That's not a technology issue. That's just simple configuration. So we need to work both aspects of this issue. We need to streamline the workflow and only capture what we need to make a decision. And to be honest with you, we've been talking about taking it a step further and minimizing the amount of time that a human being actually has to process an application. Because, and I've used this example before, and I may have done it here at a previous workshop. You can buy and sell a car right now online and not have to interact with a human being whatsoever. And you can get everything you need within 10 minutes. I don't understand why you can do that with a car, but you can't do that with a water heater permit or a fence permit or a re-roof permit. So we need to get to the point where ultimately the system asks for certain parameters and you put that information in there, and the system, because it has the algorithms and the capability, will be able to make the decision on its own that yes, this meets the requirements for you to get a water heater
But the
permit.
system
and it
upgrade
issues you the
isn't
permit.
preventing us from doing that. If we put these types of things in to try and get this workflow moving quicker, we're not going to be stopped at any point because we don't have this upgrade.
No, I don't believe that's the case. But again, I think what we need to strive for is minimizing the number of human touches with the system.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Any other questions regarding EnerGov? Okay, seeing none, thank you for the update and presentation. Item 5 is roundtable discussions. Any council members have any roundtable items to discuss?
We are getting the bridge presentation, correct, from the county?
I have an update for you on that.
I'm sorry?
I have an update for you on that.
Okay.
So council members, you requested that we reach out to our colleagues in Lee County and have them appear before you. They have responded back to us and say they are not at that point yet. And they will let us know at a later date when they will be available to share information with you. But right at the moment, they don't feel that they're in a position to do that.
Yeah, my understanding, that particular topic, just went to design. So I know they're working on it, that's what I was told. So at some point, they'll have some information to share with us.
Maybe just, they feel it's too early in the process.
Exactly.
It would have been nice to talk to us, though, while they were doing the design, since it is going to be our bridge. Just,
Well, it doesn't, it gives, you still have the opportunity typically to reach out to maybe some of the county commissioners, express whatever your concern may be. So I would recommend that to any council member. Yeah. So I think we all have that opportunity to do that. So, any other items? Seeing none, time and place of future meetings. We have a regular meeting of the Cape Coral City Council is scheduled for Wednesday, May 4th, 2022, beginning here in council chambers at 4:30 p.m. Is there a motion to adjourn? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Meeting adjourned.